You are listening to the Billy Dees podcast.
We are waiting just a minute for everyone to engage the live stream. Remember, you can find the Billy Dees podcast on your favorite platform.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the live stream. We're going to begin the podcast here in just a moment. If you are new here, we go live on X on Friday nights. And in the background, we record the podcast that you will hear on all the major podcast platforms. So we're about, a minute and 18 seconds in. So I think that's long enough for everyone to refresh their browser or sharpen up their app. And we're ready to go. Thank you. All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the program. My name is Billy Dees. If you are new here, we are primarily an interview and a commentary-based podcast. And we go live on Friday nights, and we kick around current events. Sometimes I have a co-host, sometimes it's just me, but we always try to cover the gamut of various political things. Also, if you are new here, let me just throw this out too. The podcast is not just this type of thing. We have interviews, we have a lot of other things. There was a time when I kicked around the idea of, should I have a different podcast for this? But all that does is make the show hard to find. So the brand is very consistent, and we have different topics, different styles of things, but the approach is always, I try to bring out a different perspective on things, and I don't try to go right or left. Sometimes, depending on your leanings, any given show, you might say I'm one way or the other. But what I basically try to do is try to go a direction that a lot of people may not have anticipated. We're going to talk about AI on this program. There was a lot of news and a lot of banter about that one this last week. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then I'm going to revisit some other things. Basically, Stephen Colbert and Jeffrey Epstein. I heard a term. I was listening to some British podcasters here a while back, and they were talking about, Harry and Meghan. And they referred to them as the unflushables. I just love that. The unflushables. That is absolutely fantastic. And that is that is what Stephen Colbert is. He's an unflushable for sure. Okay. But before I get into all that, I just want to say Ozzy. Ozzy was such a dichotomy. I find his loss like so many others. When I was young, Michael Jackson, Prince, Eddie Van Halen, Roger Moore in James Bond, and all of these people seemed larger than life, and they're all gone now. That that's kind of one of those things that reminds you of your own mortality. Your contemporaries. People that you looked up to your whole life started disappearing. And there was a dichotomy to him because I think he did a pretty good job or his wife did, rebranding himself as a very lovable figure in his later years. And I would say that everybody knew who he was. Everybody appreciated his music. You might not necessarily been a heavy metal fan, but anybody who's been to a ball game or anything like that has heard the intro to Crazy Train. Everybody can recognize his voice. The way he sang, it was you could recognize him instantly as Ozzy. There was just nobody else who sounded like him. He was a pioneer with certainly heavy metal, and here again, whether you appreciate the genre or not, I was never a metalhead, but I did enjoy Ozzy. And he was a pioneer with reality TV. Now, reality TV existed before he came along, but he made it fashionable for major stars to have reality shows. and a new generation of people kind of familiarize themselves with this, lovable older guy mumbling with a British accent, all these crazy things. And but he was a wild man when he was young. I was around during his career with. I'm old enough to remember the Black Sabbath days and the early Ozzy solo days, and he was pretty wild. This was a guy that he had his moments for sure. We all know the infamous biting the head off the bat, but these iconic figures when they pass, it's part of an era. There's just something that in our past, in our history, and in pop culture that dies with them, and I hated to see him go. All right, let's talk about AI. Well, I'll tell you what. Before we get into AI, I got to talk about Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden can kind of give me a smile, and I want to smile on this show, right? Hunter Biden, I'm going to play you a little clip here. This is fantastic stuff, man. Hunter Biden should start a podcast. As a matter of fact, Hunter Biden should come on this show, okay? Because he rattles some stuff off here that's just absolutely hilarious. Now, I want to preface this. There's the F word. So if the F word offends you, just be aware. Incoming. It's incoming. But this is Hunter Biden, and this is some great stuff, man. I mean, I couldn't rattle off a bunch of crap any better than this. This is Hunter at his best. This is good stuff.
But fuck him. Fuck him and everybody around him. I don't have to be fucking nice. Number one, I agree with Quentin Tarantino. Fucking George Clooney is not a fucking actor. He is a fucking, I don't know what he is. He's a brand. And by the way, and God bless him. You know what? He supposedly treats his friends really well. You know what I mean? Buys them things. And he's got a really great place in Lake Como. And he's great friends with Barack Obama. Fuck you. What do you have to do with fucking anything? Why do I have to fucking listen to you? What right do you have to step on a man who's given 52 years of his fucking life to the service of this country and decide that you, George Clooney, are going to take out basically a full-page ad in the fucking New York Times? Who's Jake Tapper's audience? Jake Tapper?
My mom or something? I don't know.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
For real, though. I don't even think it's your mom anymore.
No.
By the numbers, what influence does Jake Tapper have over anything? He has the smallest audience on cable news. And beyond that, I think that the book is right now on Amazon that he put out. I mean, his ratings just went to shit after he put the book out. They did a 2-week infomercial for it. I mean, it was such a money grab.
I know that there's the world is getting crazy for sure. When I agree with Hunter Biden, I absolutely agree with him. Jake Tapper is a POS. Jake Tapper played into this. Oh, Biden's fine. He's just absolutely fine. This is, and I've talked about that one episode I did last year, where I in a very nonpartisan manner laid out why the Democrats are going to lose from a marketing standpoint. And I covered the problems that Joe Biden was having while in office with his cognitive abilities. And I had some major left-wing pundits coming after me. Okay. And here again on X, blah, 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 but the podcast has been around a long time, gets a fair amount of traction at certain times. And, they were telling me, oh, you're playing into the conspiracy to undermine a sitting president and da-da-da-da-da. And it was obvious there was no way this guy was running again. And Jake Tapper is one of the ones that gaslit everyone. And he always talks like this. So he's very smart when he talks like this. And ladies and gentlemen, this is something that the Republicans are doing to smear a sitting president who's doing blah, blah, blah. And then he turns around and writes a book about how this whole thing was orchestrated to keep the cognitive abilities, the impairments of a sitting president, hidden from the public. He had any number of opportunities. Megyn Kelly laid out a whole bunch of them. where he could have questioned, he was in a position to question the talking points coming out of the White House. He had that opportunity. And let me tell you, anything coming out of the Trump White House gets scrutinized. A lot of times it gets put in the light that it's so ridiculous, it's not even worth talking about. I've noticed CNN do that. NBC's doing that now with Tulsi Gabbard. We're gonna get into that in a little bit too. But yeah, it's so ridiculous, it's not even worth talking about. But they didn't one little moment ever question what the White House was putting out, that everything was just peachy. And then he writes this book about it, about how terrible that was, about how the American public was duped. You could have prevented. You could have been one of the ones that questioned it. And that's something that, when we talk about free speech, the idea that you can't even question something, even if you are questioning something from a ridiculous point of view, I don't believe it should be censored. Because what's a ridiculous point of view now may not be so ridiculous a year from now or 2 years from now. And to just completely shut these dialogues down because they don't match the talking points or the facts that you believe or subscribe to them is a bad thing, because you can't even have a dialogue about a certain I got to be careful how I choose my words here, even still. I don't want to get into any trouble about a certain disease, contagious disease that's going around. You can't even question, is this, is it that? Does this medicine work on it? Is this vaccine, is this something that is viable? Has it been tested enough? These are all things that are very legitimate questions. And why you can't even talk about them. And that's exactly what went on with the cognitive abilities of Joe Biden. And quite frankly, if you're a fan of this show, you know that during all that, I was actually empathetic to what they did to Joe Biden. And he is right. Hunter is right. When the moment became right, the Democratic Party that defended him and said he was fine and stood up for him, when it was very obvious that this was no longer sustainable, they threw him under the bus. And they stuck in the vice president as the lead on the next election. So he is right about a lot of things, and I'm not kidding. That banter is actually pretty good. I really liked that banter. I would love to have him on the show. Of course, it's not going to happen, but I would be glad to talk to him. And actually, you know what? He obviously, this guy has done some shady things. He's done some things that most of us would not do. But by the same token, he has been villainized beyond what is necessary because it was politically expedient. So anyway, interesting week with AI. And, AI is one of those topics that stirs up a lot of conjecture and stirs up a lot of predictions. And we all have these apocalyptic science fiction notions about what AI is going to do. And they're out there and they're going to become sentient and they're going to do this, that, and the other thing. I don't really believe that's going to happen. And I know there's a lot of people that are going to push back on me on that, but I don't believe, I would have to say that the chances of AI becoming this science fiction monster and just taking over the world and becoming sentient and self-aware and all these other things, that's probably the least likely scenario. I would have to say that more likely a bad actor of some kind is going to use AI in a bad way. That is probably more likely. And, if you go back to World War II, just like with the atomic bomb, if Hitler would have gotten it, it would have been really bad. And if somebody like him would happen to get his hands on some advanced way to produce AI, whether it be to design biological weapons or whatever. It could be, or shut down the power grids or whatever. That would be horrible. But even that, I would have to say, is not the most likely scenario. What the most likely scenario that I've been talking about, and I haven't heard too much about, is what we're going to hear from Sam Altman. I got a little clip here for you. I played him. I got some bits of what he said. Sam Altman is the CEO of OpenAI, and he was asked what his biggest worries were in the field of AI. And he's one of the first ones that brought up what I am saying about it. And I was so happy that somebody at the top of the food chain, of the AI food chain, said this, because I'm not the only one saying it. And who am I in the grand scheme of a CEO of an AI company? But I've been saying this for a while, and go ahead and take a listen to what Sam Altman had to say about this.
I think there's three sort of scary categories. There's a bad guy gets super intelligence first and misuses it before the rest of the world has a powerful enough version to defend. Category 2 is the sort of broadly called loss of control incidents, where that's kind of like the sci-fi movie. The AI is like, oh, I don't actually want you to turn me off. I'm afraid I can't do that, whatever. And then there's the third one, which I think those first two are sort of easy to think about and imagine.
Yeah.
The third one is, to me, more difficult to imagine. We call this emotional over-reliance. People rely on ChatGPT too much. There's young people who just say, like, I can't make any decision in my life without telling ChatGPT everything that's going on. It knows me. It knows my friends. I'm going to do whatever it says. That feels really bad to me, and is a really common thing with young people. And we're studying that. We're trying to understand what to do about it.
Yeah, he's exactly right. And he's exactly right. That's the thing. We've all heard the cliche example of, if you just stick your hand into boiling water, you go, ow, okay. But if you sit down in a hot tub, let's say, and the heat just slowly starts to rise, and let's say something's wrong with the hot tub and it just keeps getting hotter and hotter and hotter to the point of where it's almost, you don't feel the heat coming on until it's too late. And what I'm describing here is what has already happened with the phones. When these smartphones first came out, and I'm a user of them, I am absolutely a user of them. There's absolutely no question. I usually am on them most of the time to manage my social media promotion of the podcast and other things I'm doing. But I do get spells where I for enjoyment, or I just get interested in something. And I'm not defending what I am doing in comparison to what young people are doing, except I was brought up, and I don't necessarily mean by my parents, but by the world, in a way where I knew what reality was. I, played outside in the evenings the majority of the time. I wasn't sitting at home fumbling around on a screen somewhere. There was television back in the 70s, and the difference was we watched the $6 Million Man on whatever night it was on, at 8 o'clock or whatever. And the next day we were outside running down the, running down the alley, pretending we were running 55 miles an hour. And it translated into some sort of activity, and it sparked our imaginations. That's not happening with this stuff here. The younger people now, before their minds have a chance to develop on their own and develop from influences that are in the real world, they're getting they're developing around images that really don't exist. They're around notions that really don't exist, about their impressions of society or societal norms that really aren't accurate or are not healthy. These are all, and the porn. And, I'm here again, I'm a free speech person. I don't necessarily have a problem with porn in and of and by itself being available to adults in the right situations, although you can become addicted to that as well. But in my day, here again, finding, some kid found a magazine with a naked picture in it, and it was just a picture of the female form, right? And here again, I would argue that 10-year-old, 11-year-old boy, there's a natural curiosity that is very healthy about the female form, or what have you, about the body and how it works, and sexuality. But can you imagine kids younger? I can't imagine kids now who are 10, 9, 8, viewing what amounts to rape, viewing what amounts to gross sexual activities. I personally can't quite. I'm not sure how I would have processed that when I was 8 or 9 years old or 10 years old. Now maybe kids today are different. I don't know, but I can't believe that this is a healthy thing. And this AI thing is going to creep in on us the same way that the iPhones did. And I'm not the iPhones in particular. I'm not picking on that, but just smartphones in general. The way these tablets, the way this information comes at us now, and parents give this stuff to their kids at way too young of an age, in my opinion, for the most part. They give their kids access to these things. They have no idea what their kids are doing, but they do it because they're babysitters. We hear so much about the pills that we give kids for, overactivity and all these other things. The electronics that we give them is just as bad. If you're using it, your kids are driving you crazy, they won't shut up. Here, play this game. Blow some people's heads up. I can't believe that is a good thing for a developing mind. I just can't believe it. And people always say, well, what? Well, the data on this and the studies show, and you don't have to take my word about any studies. Just use your own observations. If you are older than the 30, let's say, you've seen the natural cycle of life. Okay. And your own observations with kids that are in your family, your friends, kids that you watch grow up, they're in a different situation now than kids were in my day, when our influences were backyard football, or backyard baseball. Or in my case, I tried to, one of my more infamous stories as a child, I set my bike on fire and ran across the ramp because I wanted to be like Evel Knievel. Now, was that a wise thing to do? No, I could have gotten badly hurt. The police were called. It was a whole mess. But I was in the real world. Okay. And yeah, the kids like us did get hurt back in the 70s and 80s. And that was part of growing up. 1 or 2 trips to the emergency room, and all of a sudden, okay, I got the idea I shouldn't do this anymore. My dad told me he was mad about me getting hurt, and he said, next time it happens, we're not going to take you to the emergency room. You're just going to have to sit there and bleed. It was a different time. That's all I'm saying. And these influences now are not just a matter of them being quote unquote electronic. There's people behind these images. What's happening on social media is you have probably AI working it now, and you had a lot of human designers in its early day trying to figure out ways to keep people addicted to it, trying to find out ways to keep people on so they could be exposed to ads. All right. And hopefully, if you're of a certain age as an adult, you understand this. It's time to put it down. 10-year-old kids do not. And we have people now with the advent of AI, and it's been around a long time, but it's the technology is getting to the point now where it's everywhere. We're sitting in the boiling water, and it's getting hotter. There's not going to be a James Bond villain that's going to come along, in my opinion. And this thing is going to become something that we have to fight on some science fiction level. It's going to creep in. We're in the boiling water. It's not boiling yet, but it's getting warmer. We're sitting in the water and we're relatively comfortable right now with AI, and the water's getting hotter. It's getting hotter. And pretty soon, the way we function, the way we make our decisions about life, the way we make our decisions about our children, the way we make our decisions about our family, our interpersonal relationships. You're having trouble in your marriage, you're going to be asking AI what you should do about it. That is where we are going. And at what point does our evolution, does our development become artificial? That to me is what's really, it's not as dramatic. You know, it's not as dramatic as a James Bond villain. It's not as dramatic as, you know, this computer. Hello, what are you doing? Don't turn me off. I'm in control. It's not as dramatic as that. But it is the most likely thing that's going to throw us off if we do not become even more self-aware than what we already are about our own existence as human beings, and take responsibility for ourselves. That is where this has a very dangerous aspect to it. Okay. As I said, I'm going to revisit some of the unflushables. And here's the first unflushable, and that's Stephen Colbert. Now, I talked about this last week, and that's why I didn't put it at the forefront of the podcast today, but Stephen Colbert has somehow become a martyr for the left. All of these shows, these late night shows, Jimmy Fallon and The Tonight Show. The Tonight Show, of course, branded famously by Johnny Carson. But before him, Jack Paar. A lot of people don't mention him. Jack Paar was also very good. Johnny was in the stratosphere. You know, I heard some statistics, it's easy for me to say, about Johnny Carson. Johnny Carson commanded about 30% of the income that NBC had when he was at his height. That in today's dollars probably translates to $1 billion a year. Okay, in today's dollars. That is the viewership that he had. Now, yes, it was a different time in terms of how our media was presented to the public. That's absolutely true. But the other aspect of this is that Johnny was likable. Johnny treated his guests with respect, and Johnny Carson did not take sides. I played a clip last week where he talked about how dangerous it is for entertainers. And I'm paraphrasing here, I'm adding a little in, but when an entertainer, especially a musician, in my opinion, can affect your emotions, like we talked about Ozzy a little bit ago, you have this, and he wasn't necessarily an emotional performer, but some of these people that make you feel a certain way about yourself, they have different types of content, and you're somebody who you're a young impressionable person, and you're looking at somebody, and that's one thing I will say about the 1970s. I grew up in an era which was very unhealthy for men, for young boys, in that, you know, partying and being able to survive a night of binging was a sign of your manhood, and a lot of that came from rock and roll stars. Okay. So you have this ability to have people want to emulate you when you are so loved, and when what you are doing means so much to so many people. Is it responsible for you to push the political dialogue one way or the other? Is that a responsible thing to do? And I know people say, well, everybody has a right to speak. Yeah, but it's a little different when so many people are in love with you and you have the ability to talk about something that you may not know shit about and affect the opinion of millions of people. Is that a responsible thing to do as an entertainer? And I use the word entertainer in quotation marks because I'm not sure that's what Stephen Colbert is. His show is listed as political satire. And Jimmy Kimmel Live, you know, there was a time when Jimmy Kimmel first went on. I kind of liked him. I thought he was kind of funny. But that whole COVID thing, if I can say the word on different platforms without raising the red flags, the boogeyman is out there. Okay. The way that was all handled during the pandemic, I didn't care for his attitude at all. He was one of the people that looked down on people who were making some very basic questions. People who just wanted more information besides what was being, given out. Jimmy Fallon, The Tonight Show. My main criticism of Jimmy Fallon is that he laughs too hard at all his guest jokes, and all his little he knows all the important people in the business and got all this insight, and he's always giggly. It seems very contrived to me. But Stephen Colbert, the show is actually listed. I looked this up. It's political satire, and I don't even really think it's satire. He's actually presenting an opinion as if it is the truth, and he does it in a very matter-of-fact way. And getting back to Johnny Carson, what Johnny Carson did well was he recognized that time slot was a time when people have been through the stressors of the day. They're settling down. They're on their couch, maybe getting ready to go to bed. They got a little blanket on. They're maybe even sitting in bed in their bedroom. And they're just winding down. And they get this old friend to tell a few jokes, treat people respectfully, talk to the audience respectfully, not talk down to them, not lecture them. And it was a friendly place when I was a young person listening to Johnny Carson, and then later with David Letterman. And actually, I believe even Jay Leno did a great job of having fun with politics, but that's it. Not picking a side and getting mean and lecturing people. That's not satire, and that is what Stephen Colbert does. And, you may not know this. I'll finish up with Stephen Colbert with this. There was a time when I did comedy for a while. And one of the things in comedy that we would often say if we were doing things in tandem on stage and even in broadcast, doing podcasts, whatever, when you have 2 people or 3 people on a show, one of the rules is you don't walk on each other's lines. Okay, walking on someone's line is right, they're setting up a joke. They're setting up a point, and they're going to come in with a big boom, and you walk on it. That's called walking on somebody's lines. That's interrupting or interjecting something before they're finished. Stephen Colbert will do that. When a guest is making a point that he doesn't agree with, he will interrupt. He will go, wait a minute, don't you feel that? That whole little and Johnny never did that. David Letterman would look to the side or whatever and roll his eyes at some point and then ask a follow-up question, but he always let the guy finish. Jay Leno did too. And I to his credit, some of the other people, other people out there that I don't necessarily like, they do that as well. Jon Stewart, he's a perfect example. He's certainly more left to center than I am. But when he's got somebody on his show that he doesn't necessarily agree with, he lets them make their point. And then he might sneer or make a little joke, but he doesn't walk on their material. And Stephen Colbert, if you are not walking his line, he will walk on it. And here again, his audience doesn't care, because that's my next point. I'm going to say that at this juncture in 2025, late night as we know it, what Johnny Carson did is a shadow, if that, of what it was. It has become political commentary. It has become the Rachel Maddow show masquerading as a talk show, as an entertainment show, as a comedy show. None of these people are particularly funny. And I made this point last week. If you take Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, and Stephen Colbert all at the same time slot and flip through your channels, you can barely tell one from the other. They don't look that different. They don't sound that different. And one of the things that, the production costs in these shows is through the roof, which I don't understand. They're all saying the same jokes. Trump is orange. Trump is this. Trump is that. And the whole thing just stinks to high heaven. And now I understand that Stephen Colbert, now that he is quote unquote canceled, which to me isn't canceled when your show is going to run to next May. It's just not being renewed. And it's not being renewed because, like all of the shows in the last 7 years, their advertisers are half of what they were. That's true of all three of them in just the last 7 years. And the audience for these shows, Stephen Colbert in particular, and that's where I'm going with this, they don't care that he bloviates because that's where they get their information. They are baby boomers. Nobody under the age of 25 is watching any of this crap. As a matter of fact, there's a good chance that if you are under the age of 25, you've never watched the 6 o'clock news a day in your life. Okay. That's where we are at with media. And boomers are at 8 o'clock or whatever, listening to cable news, 9 o'clock cable news. Then they might, find some drama on TV to watch for an hour or two. Then they watch their local news, and then they turn on Stephen Colbert. That's what they do all evening. These, and I'm not. You can check this out. The average age for people watching Stephen Colbert is north of me, and I'm hardly a young man like I once was. And they make me look young. So that's why these shows are not doing well. $40 million is what's being tossed about in terms of the money they're losing. And it's not just because advertising is down, which is significant. Like I said, last 7 years, these three shows average 50% down on advertisers. But they have extremely high production costs. I don't understand why it takes hundreds of people to produce these shows. The jokes aren't that good. Now, I understand you need some staffing to book the guests and take care of transportation and all this. And obviously, there's technical people involved. And depending on what your relationship is with the studio, sometimes if you have an agreement for a technical production company, you're not directly involved in that. You're paying a company to take care of the cameras and everything. You're not directly involved in any of that. So I don't understand why you need hundreds of people to manage these shows and pay them top dollar, because it's not appearing on the screen. There's nothing different from what Stephen Colbert does than what Rachel Maddow does, or any of those pundits on cable TV. The only difference is he's standing up, he's got a band over to the side and a live audience. Otherwise, it's the same bullshit. It's the same bullshit. So people are still crying about this, and they're turning him into a martyr. Stephen Colbert is on the stake with Joan of Arc, and he's dying for free speech, and he's going to, although the gloves are off until May. If they really wanted him off the air, he'd be off. If they really wanted him canceled, they're just not renewing it. And that comes from a changing climate. And I would have to say my prediction, late night TV in a very short period of time within the next few years is going to change. There's going to be different type of programming, and it's not going to be the same old, how you doing tonight? Hi, how's the band over there? It's going to be different. It's going to be different. That format perfected by Johnny Carson has run, it's 70 years old now. If you go back to Jack Parr, it's time we move on. Okay, the other unflushable is Epstein. And, I made this prediction about Diddy. I said nothing was going to come of that. I made this prediction about the Epstein client list. I said nothing was going to come of that. And now this big thing is this list and who's on it. Ghislaine Maxwell apparently met with Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche and the DOJ. She was asked maybe about 100 different people. She answered questions about everybody and didn't hold anything back. Now listen to what I just said there, because I've noticed people on social media saying she's got information on 100 people. No, that's misleading. When you hear the name Ghislaine Ghislaine Maxwell, and you hear, oh, she's got information on 100 names, it implies that there's 100 people that are implicated in some sex. No. What the exact quote in the report is she was asked about 100 different people. And that can mean a lot of things. She answered questions about everybody and didn't hold anything back. Maxwell's attorney, David Oscar Marcus, said on Friday, which is today. Maxwell, who is serving a 20-year prison sentence for her role in helping Epstein recruit, groom, and abuse underage girls. That's who that is. She was asked about every possible thing you can imagine. Everything is the other quote from David Oscar Marcus. This was the first opportunity she has ever been given to answer questions about what happened. The truth will come out about what happened with Mr. Epstein, and she's the person who will be answering those questions. Just as we were going live, I don't know exactly what this means, but apparently some form of limited immunity by the Justice Department under President Trump was granted to her. And I will say this, if he's worried about anything coming out, I don't know that he would be granting her immunity, because that basically says run your mouth as much as you want. But I could be wrong about that. Who knows? Here is what I am very positive about. I can't say for sure, but I said nothing was going to come of the Diddy files. Nothing was going to come of the Epstein files. And this whole thing with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and all this other stuff, nothing's going to come of that either. It's just not going to happen. And I'll tell you why. Here's the bottom line. I don't care if you hate Trump or if you love him. I don't care if you like Bill Clinton or you can't stand him or any of your favorite movie stars. Here's the bottom line. Nobody wants this stuff out. Nobody. They're pretending like the other side doesn't want it out, but they're not sticking their neck out too far if you really listen close, because nobody wants this out. Republicans don't want this out. Democrats don't want it out. And there's a lot of people in the media who don't want this out. Plain and simple. It ain't going to happen. And it's already probably been hidden largely by now. And this whole thing with Maxwell is going to be a bust. There's going to be a few little things that dribble out to give everybody something to chat about on social media. But in the big scheme of things, nothing's going to happen. Now, in the midst of this, the other kind of side hustle is Tulsi Gabbard. She was speaking, obviously from the White House, and she stopped short of saying anything about Obama directly, but especially in regard to treason. But she did allege that the evidence that they have found and what they have released does directly point to the Obama administration leading to the manufacturing of intelligence that implicated Russia and Trump and all this other stuff. Here again, I doubt very much that anything serious is going to come of this. They would have to find a really hot barreled smoking gun, and I don't believe that's happened yet, and it's probably not going to. If Tulsi Gabbard really believes in this, I will give her some cred, because she's being hit by all sides. Okay, she's being very discredited. NBC, I've been listening to some of their stuff. I checked out their website before I hopped on here. They're basically saying she's trying to cause a distraction, and this is all silliness and da-da-da-da. CNN, somebody made a remark that this is something they don't even want to, or ordinarily wouldn't even be reporting on, words to that effect. I'm paraphrasing. So she has been hit by all sides, and she might really believe in this. She might really believe that this is something that's worth talking about. And she has been discredited by everybody to some degree, and especially the left. But she has taken a lot of hits talking about this. And I like Tulsi Gabbard. But here again, regardless of how you feel about this, how true you think it is, I just don't think anything is going to come of it. But time will tell. All right. That's kind of my summation for this week. If you can, I would really appreciate it if you can subscribe to the Billy Dees podcast on your favorite podcasting platform. We do not have paywalls for listeners. Okay. So if you subscribe to the Billy Dees podcast on your favorite platform, you can enjoy the content as much as you want and never hit a paywall. And I know it has become a thing now, even on social media, to sell subscriptions. You can follow the Billy Dees podcast. You can follow me, Billy Dees, at Billy Dees on X. That's kind of like my social media home. And you can also on Facebook. We don't have a big following on our Facebook page, but we have a lot more details about what's going on in the background, what we're using in terms of studio gear and what we're doing about marketing and how we're managing certain things. And a lot of people that enjoy media, maybe they're a creator, they're a content creator of their own, and they enjoy the Facebook page. It's real small. But here again, the real action for me is on X at Billy Dees. That's kind of where we post what we're doing with the podcast. If you do check out the podcast, please check out the entire playlist. As I said earlier, we have commentary programs like this one. We do the Friday Night Lives. I sometimes have co-hosts a lot of times, and we're going to have some coming up. And we also do interviews. We do interviews with authors. We do interviews with people who have causes. Do check out the episode. It's just a couple episodes in. If you check out our playlist with Bill Thompson. Bill Thompson, speaking of AI, has a new effort he's doing called AI Over 40. And it talks about how you can use AI no matter what you're doing with your business or your content. If you are over the age of 40, some practical things that you can do. I'm not sure it's not limited to people over 40, but the idea is that older generations may not be in tune to some of this technology. And he's going to kind of help you out with that. And that's Bill Thompson. That interview is in our playlist. So do check that out. AI After 40 with Bill Thompson. That's a good one to check out. All right. I am Billy Dees. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast today. And we will be talking to you again very, very soon. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Billy Dees podcast. Follow Billy Dees on X at Billy Dees for updates about the program.
Do you listen to music or audiobooks on streaming devices such as Sonos or Amazon speakers? How about on your car sound system? If you use Spotify, Audible, or Amazon Music on any of these systems, you can also listen to the Billy Dees podcast the same way. Billy and his team go the extra mile to make sure our podcasts sound as good or better than anything on the radio. Listening to the Billy Dees podcast has never been easier. You literally just have to ask.